So I got a comment on one of my other videos the other day from a viewer, and he was asking actually a really good question. And that is, do I have to provide a reference from the job where I was fired after 4 months? Will that ruin my chances? Now, the short answer is no, you don't have to provide that reference, but we'll get into that in just a minute. But it got me to thinking, what other interview questions typically cause you to have a sense of dread when they're asked, or the anticipation of them actually causes you to have a sense of dread? And the one I landed on was, why did you leave your last job? Or why are you thinking about leaving your current job? That is rife with problems. It's a minefield of traps for you. Everybody fears that question, whether you're fired, laid off, or you're just miserable in your current job. Some preparation and some simple thought about how to approach this question, which is going to come. It's going to be one of those first questions in the interview, is key to successfully navigating it and moving on to what you can actually bring to the table with respect to the job you're interviewing for. So in this video, we're going to break all that down. We're going to also do a little myth busting with respect to actually what comes up on a background check, because that's germane to all of this, right? People may lie or fib in this question and then worry that, oh my God, the fact that I got fired is going to come up on a background check. But we'll get to that in a minute. So we're breaking down those two things today, background check myths and how to answer this question about why you left your last job. But before we jump in, I need to give a shout out of today's sponsor for this video, and that is Just Talk Studios here in Bellevue, Washington, where I'm sitting right now. And Just Talk Studios, we also help people create new podcasts, launch new YouTube channels, or do content creation for other platforms as well. So if you've got a story to tell or a voice you want to be heard, if you're in the greater Seattle area, check us out. The link is in the description below. So why is this question so tough? Again, why did you leave your last job? Why are you thinking about leaving your current employer? Why is that question so tough? And it's always at the front end of the interview, right? That is one of those icebreaker questions. It's tough because if you navigate it wrong and if you overshare, that could get you in a world of trouble that you can't, walk back in the interview. And it's also a problem because on its face, it's vague, right? You can take it in a variety of directions. You could have a problem with your toxic boss, that maybe the job was a bad fit. Maybe it's a layoff or a firing, right? All of that's going through your head and your brain's trying to be like, which one do I pick? Which one do I tell them? How honest do I be? That's why preparation for this question is so critical, because candidates time and time again overthink it and overshare it and under-prepare for it, right? So it could actually set the tone for the rest of the interview. Interviewers actually use it to test composure, right? They're looking at, okay, how is this person actually approaching this question? Are they being honest? Is it authentic? Are they bad-mouthing a former employer? Spoiler alert, no good ever comes from that. Even if it feels good to say, oh, I had a toxic boss, the environment was toxic, all of that, no good will ever come from it. In just a minute, I'm going to tell you a little story about my time at Tesla and how my answer to this question came up, and I didn't handle it well. But here's the thing. At the end of the day, this question is less about the past, and it's more about whether you can tell your story and reframe it with confidence. So, Rob, how do I reframe it is a question you may be thinking of right now. And it's very, very simple. It is a one-liner followed by a pivot into something of value. So let's talk about a few different scenarios. One, say you're the victim of a layoff or a restructure, right? You simply are very honest about it. My role was impacted, but while I was at that organization, there's the pivot, I learned X, Y, and Z, which I bring to the table for this job. And if you want to go even further on that, to distract them over here to the something shiny, is here were the results on what I learned on whatever you're talking about in your example. That is interview gold, because suddenly they don't care that you were impacted by a restructure or a layoff. They want to know what you're actually going to bring to the table. They're asking follow-up questions. Oh, tell me more about the results you achieved. I really want to know about that. That is a great way to reframe it. Again, it's a one-liner, you're pivoting, and then you're giving them something of value that pertains to the job you're interviewing for. Let's say you had a short stint, like the viewer comment that I told you about at the beginning of this video. Let's say you had a short stint at an employer, and in his case, he was fired, right? So how do you handle that? Because some, recruiters will ask about if you're frequently job hopping things. So if you've got this blip on your radar that's a short stint, it could be a bit of a red flag. So how do you navigate that? You could just simply say, I got there, it really wasn't a good fit for me. It wasn't the job I thought it would be. So here's what I learned. Again, there's your pivot. And here's why I'm actually seeking new employment and why I'm really interested in this position. And here's what I can bring to the table. Again, you're distracting them and focusing them on all of the good stuff you can bring, not that, hey, I only lasted there for 6 months. So speaking of that, I actually, as you know from my intro, I worked at Tesla for about 6 months, six very long months. I was going to be interviewing at Boeing, and I found myself sitting in front of the vice president of human resources interviewing for a job, and we were having she was good because she made me wickedly comfortable, I should say, such that I was kind of prone to oversharing. When she asked me, hey, why are you leaving Tesla? We kind of talked about how, it was, the future, all that stuff, right? And I was kind of honest, overly honest. I was like, well, there's Elon and, he's kind of crazy and all the things. And I kind of went down this little rabbit trail. It didn't backfire in the moment because I obviously got the job at Boeing. It could have gone down this rabbit hole where I just kind of talked myself into a corner where I was bad-mouthing the company, I was bad-mouthing Elon, all that stuff. It was not a good color on me to bring to the interview. So in retrospect, I should have said, you know what? The company was a bit volatile, which is the truth. There was some talks of bankruptcy right at the time I was there, and I'm looking to get back to the Pacific Northwest. And here's what I want to bring to the table. Here's why I'm interested in the Boeing job. Thankfully, it did not backfire on me. But you can see how if you go down this road of bad-mouthing your boss, bad-mouthing a leader or an organization, it can totally backfire on you and actually set the tone for the rest of the interview. A lot of recruiters or hiring managers, if they hear that type of stuff, they're just checked out right then, and they're going to go through the motions of the rest of the interview because they want to be consistent. In short, don't badmouth your former boss. Don't badmouth your former employer. Take the high road. Say this didn't work out. Make the pivot. Add something of value. So let's say now, again, like in our viewer's example and his comment, I'm going to read between the lines and say that he was a bit of a performance issue, or maybe the company thought that he had some issues or whatever it was because he was fired in a relatively short period of time. So what he could do without lying and without saying, oh, I got fired, they could say, hey, you were only here for 4 months. What happened there? He's like, you know what? This really wasn't a good fit. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be, kind of like we said before. And here's what I learned. Here's what job I'm looking for that can play to my strengths, and here's why we're sitting here talking today about this job in question. And this is where my strengths, I think, will be an asset to you as a prospective employer. Again, now we've shifted the conversation. We owned it. We didn't have to tell them that we got fired, but we owned it. And then we pivoted, and now we've got them on to talking about something of value. So don't linger over here. Give them a one-liner. And this is where you need to practice, right? Because you want to say it confidently in the moment. You don't want to be like, and start sweating, right? Because then that just kind of makes it jumbles your brain, and you're not going to show up well for the rest of the interview. One-liner, pivot, item of value. Keep doing it. And then you'll walk into that room really confident, and this will not be an issue for you. References, can you provide references? Absolutely. I have a list of references of people that can speak to my strengths and what I can bring to this organization. Here you go. Are they going to ask me if I can provide a reference from my last boss? You don't need to give them that. You can say, again, steer them to, hey, you know what? I appreciate that, but these are the people I think can be really representative of my work and what I can bring to the table here. I have never heard of a prospective employer during a reference check process ask, I need references from your most recent employer. Just supply the references. It probably won't come up in the interview. It'll probably be part of the application process. Hey, can you provide references? Yes, here you go, blah, blah, blah. Same with background checks, right? So they could say, hey, part of the qualifications for this role is you must successfully pass a background check. And here's what it is. You can just very confidently say, with regard to my work history, the background check will actually confirm my dates of employment and my job titles as I represented on the application and my resume, so no other issues will come up. Now, I will give a quick caveat here. If you have a felony on your record, even a misdemeanor, make sure you're answering that question honestly on the application, because if you say no and something comes up on your background check, it's game over at that point. They will say you falsified documents, you weren't honest. So if you do have that, make sure you are proactively having a conversation with the hiring team or the recruiter. The recruiter is probably the best person to handle this, and say, hey, I just want to be upfront with this. This is on my record, and kind of walk them through, what your specific situation is. And maybe if having a felony on your record, as an example, is going to be a knockout, then let's not waste anybody's time. You can move on and go apply for different jobs, and they cannot waste their time either. But here's some myths I want to bust, right? Because it goes back to the viewer comment on one of my other videos. First of all, that a firing will show up on a background check. No. It won't. Now, I do have some caveats, which I'll get to in a second, but by and large, a background check is confirming your dates of employment and your job title, sometimes your salary. So that's what they're doing. They're not doing reference checks when they're doing a background check. That's two different things. If they are doing reference checks, I find that process, personally, my humble opinion, to be totally antiquated. They might get some more editorializing from the person, but that's where you control who you say, yes, you can reach out and talk to these people about my performance and what their thoughts are on my performance. Again, the other myth is, like we talked about from the viewer comment, is, do I need to use my last boss as a reference? No, you don't. You control that. And again, I'm going to underline, I've never heard, and please let me know in the comments if you've ever had this, where the prospective company you're applying for has actually said, we need your last manager to provide you a reference. I would love to be proven wrong. I hope I'm not. I hope it's very few and far between that companies are asking for that. But let me know in the comments if that's happened to you. And the other myth is that you don't need to overshare or over-explain every detail with respect to why you transitioned out of a company, whether it be layoff, firing, or whatever. Again, keep it short, simple, and concise. Do the pivot and move on. I can hear somebody, maybe other HR professionals watching this or whatever it is, I can hear them saying, Rob, you're wrong. They do check for some things, with respect to performance and different things in background checks. And I don't disagree. There are some exceptions, but I would also double down on that. By and large, they are checking just job titles and dates of employment. But if you think about a small business without an HR function, right? They may be more open to editorializing about your performance, good, bad, or indifferent. So that could be a wild card. You may be wondering, Rob, why would a larger company not want to provide a reference? Well, I can answer that. Companies want to stay out of litigation. And if you have a manager giving their opinion that may or may not be based in fact about an employee's performance, they could be setting that themselves up or the company up for a libel or a slanderous allegation of potential litigation. Now, in a small company, again, the gloves may be off and it's going to be a little bit of the wild, wild west out there. And, you never know what you're going to get from that leader. There are also some regulated industries that will do a bit of a deeper dive, whether it's finance, whether it's healthcare, even defense, or something requiring a security clearance. I know my best friend works for the government, and she had to get her security clearance. They talked to her neighbors. They talked to a bunch of people, myself included, for her background check. So here's the thing. You need to be aware of what you're signing with respect to a release to have a background check conducted on you. So they're going to put a piece of paper in front of you. Read it. I would say take 5 minutes and read it all, just so you know what they're going to look for in your background. Ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. That's not a red flag. You want to make sure you have clarity on what you're signing. The problems that I see arise in background checks, just from my experience, is when somebody was not forthcoming on the information they provided during the application process or during the consent to have a background check process done. So make sure when you are checking those boxes, yes, I affirm all my statements are true, blah, 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 make sure they actually are true. Otherwise, it will probably bite you in the ass. So when these questions about your background, about why you're leaving or why you've left an employer, if they are handled well, and again, practice makes perfect, they show resilience, self-awareness, and confidence, and you can get out of it very quickly. Again, give them a one-liner, pivot and give him something of value. That's the way to handle these questions and get the conversation focused on what you actually bring to the table as a really competitive candidate for this role. Don't let being fired or laid off or being a bad fit at another employer define you and knock the confidence out of you. Everybody goes through that on some level. And if you practice and prepare for these questions, I know I keep repeating myself from a practice standpoint, but if practice makes perfect, then you will sail through these questions and really get to the really good questions in the interview where you can shine and show, yes, here's what I bring to the table. Here's results I have actually achieved in the past. And here's why I'm excited for this role and for this organization. If you like this type of content, I would be absolutely honored if you would like this video and subscribe to my channel. And also, I have just launched memberships, so be sure to check that out. So tell me in the comments, what is the hardest interview question you've ever been asked? Or what's the weirdest question you've ever been asked? I've said this in other videos. I was asked once, if you could be a box of cereal, what would you be and why? What? I think I said Captain Crunch with Crunch Berries, but I have no idea why. So if you are in the job search process right now, I wish you well. I hope it is a speedy process, and I hope you land a better job than you had before or you have currently. If you are currently at a company and you are thriving, I wish you continued success. And until next time, my name's Rob, and take care. This video was recorded and produced by Just Talk Studios, the premier video podcasting studio in Bellevue, Washington. Visit justtalkstudios.com to learn more and book your session today.